Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. And today we're diving into a pretty somber topic, actually, the Bering Air Flight 445 crash.
Oh, yeah.
This just happened a few days ago, February 6th.
Right.
Near Nome, Alaska.
Yeah.
And tragically, all 10 people on board were lost, including the pilot.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
So we're going to try to get beyond just the headlines here today. Really dig into some of the details. And we've got some news articles, of course, official statements, and even some early accident reports.
Yeah.
To try to understand, not just what happened,
Right.
but kind of the why.
Yeah.
Why this matters. And I think this is especially crucial when we're talking about a place like Alaska, where air travel is so vital to daily life.
Yeah, over 80% of Alaskan communities are completely inaccessible by road.
Really?
That's more than anywhere else in the U.S. And it's not just about, getting from point A to point B. It's about access to healthcare jobs, even just seeing family. So this crash really highlights how woven aviation is into just the fabric of life up there.
Yeah. I can only imagine that, like, being completely reliant on these small planes.
Yeah.
To live your life.
It's a different world.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we've got quite a stack of sources here.
We do.
I'll kind of unpack this. So where should we start?
Well, I think before we get into, the specifics of Flight 445, it's important to grasp the context of flying in Alaska, because it's not like hopping on a plane for vacation somewhere.
Right.
You're talking about vast distances, unpredictable weather,
Yeah.
often landing strips that are just, carved out of the wilderness.
Oh, wow.
It's a challenging environment.
Yeah.
It demands a different level of skill and awareness.
Yeah. Just thinking about, the pilots and the crews that are flying these routes constantly.
Yeah.
I mean, it must be so intense.
It is.
So, okay, so that's kind of setting the stage. So how does Bering Air fit into all of this?
So they're a regional airline based in Nome, and they fly, to get this, 32 destinations.
Wow.
Across Alaska.
32.
Yeah. So, 32 destinations all connected by air because you can't reach them.
By road.
Wow.
Wow.
And it just speaks volumes about, the role these smaller airlines play in keeping these communities connected.
It's like a bus route in the sky.
Kind of, yeah.
But with much higher stakes.
Absolutely. And those stakes are tragically highlighted by this crash.
Yeah.
And while Flight 445 is making headlines now, Alaska unfortunately has a history of aviation incidents.
Right.
The terrain, the weather, these are constant factors.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's get into it then. Let's talk about the timeline of Flight 445.
Sure.
What do we know so far?
So the flight took off from Unalakleet on the morning of February 6th.
Okay.
Heading for Nome, it was a routine flight less than an hour.
Okay.
And about 10 minutes before its scheduled landing, contact was lost.
So just minutes away from landing.
Yeah.
And something went wrong.
Yeah.
What does the radar data show?
This is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
The data indicates a sudden and rapid loss of both altitude and speed.
Oh, wow.
We're talking dramatic descent here.
Wow.
And to make things even more puzzling, there were no distress signals sent out.
No distress signals. That seems unusual, especially if they were experiencing like a major problem like that.
It does raise questions because, most planes have those emergency transmitters.
Right.
That automatically activate upon impact or submersion in water.
Right.
The fact that no signal was received, it adds another layer of mystery here.
Yeah, so sudden descent, no distress signals.
Right.
And this is all happening just minutes from the runway in Nome.
Correct.
What was going on at the airport at the time?
That's another curious detail. The pilot, Chad Antill, had told air traffic control in Anchorage that he was entering a holding pattern.
Okay.
He believed the runway in Nome was closed due to weather.
Okay.
However, reports show that the runway was actually open.
Wait, so the runway was open?
It was open.
So he's thinking he needs to circle.
Right.
Wait for a clear runway, but it's actually already clear.
And it had even been de-iced.
Okay, that definitely throws a wrench into things.
It adds a layer of complexity.
For sure.
That the NTSB now has to untangle.
And they've got their work cut out for them, too, especially given where this crash happened. I mean, we're talking about a drifting ice floe, right?
Yeah, the wreckage was found on an ice floe in the Bering Sea.
Wow.
About 34 miles southeast of Nome.
Okay.
And it's not only incredibly remote, but this ice floe was drifting about 5 miles per day.
5 miles a day.
Yeah, can you imagine just trying to get to the site, let alone recover anything?
It's like trying to hit a moving target.
Exactly.
In the middle of the ocean.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So who was involved in the search and rescue efforts then?
Well, it was a massive effort. The Nome Volunteer Fire Department,
Okay.
the U.S. Coast Guard, the Alaska National Guard, even local volunteers all played a role.
Wow.
These folks are truly heroes working in incredibly challenging conditions.
Right. Oh, yeah. To recover the victims and try to piece together what happened.
I read that they were able to recover the remains of all 10 victims.
They were.
But that getting the actual wreckage off of the ice floe is going to require a Black Hawk helicopter.
Wow.
It's a reminder of the scale of this whole thing.
It is.
And the logistical hurdles.
Absolutely. But amidst all of that, I think it's important to remember, the human cost here. 10 lives were lost.
Right.
10 individuals with their own stories, their own families, and contributions to their communities.
Yeah, let's talk about some of those individuals. We know the pilot was Antill, 34 years old, from Nome.
Right. And among the passengers, there was Donnell Erickson. He was 58, also from Nome, and Carol Mooers, who was 48.
Okay.
These weren't just names on a passenger list.
Right.
These were people with lives, with connections.
Loved ones
left behind.
Yeah, there's a story about 2 passengers that really struck me, Rhone Baumgartner and Kameron Hartvigson. You're talking about the 2 employees of the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium.
Yes.
They were heading to Unalakleet to service the heat recovery system for the community's water plant.
Wow.
In the depths of an Alaskan winter, they were on that flight to make sure people had access to clean water.
That's incredible.
It's a powerful thing.
And so sad, too.
It is, yeah.
Their dedication to the community is so inspiring, and it really underscores the vital role that everyday Alaskans play in keeping these remote communities functioning.
It puts the tragedy into perspective.
So while we're, starting to learn more about the victims and the recovery efforts are underway, I can't help but think about what the NTSB is doing right now.
Right.
What does an investigation like this actually involve? It's not just like looking at the wreckage, right?
No, it's far more in depth than that. I mean, the NTSB investigation is like piecing together a giant complex jigsaw puzzle.
Oh, man.
I mean, think of it as, a forensic investigation, but for planes.
Okay.
They'll be analyzing the black box recordings.
Right. Which capture everything from cockpit conversations to the plane's technical performance.
So it's like a time machine.
Kinda.
To go back and listen to those crucial last moments. So what else are they focusing on?
Well, they'll be meticulously examining the wreckage for signs of mechanical failure, any evidence of external factors, like a bird strike or a lightning strike.
Wow.
Anything out of the ordinary. And on top of that, they'll be analyzing the radar track, the air traffic control communications weather reports.
Right.
Every piece of information they can get their hands on to try to understand what happened in those minutes and seconds leading up to the crash.
It's a massive undertaking.
It is.
But crucial to getting answers.
Yeah.
Are there any initial theories or clues emerging about what might have caused the crash?
It's still very early in the investigation.
Okay.
So it's really too soon to speculate.
Right.
And, these investigations can take months, even years.
Wow.
To reach a conclusion. I know people are eager for answers, especially given the loss of life, but it's got to be thorough.
Absolutely. Rushing to conclusions can lead to, inaccurate findings and missed opportunities for improvement.
Right.
The NTSB is very meticulous in their approach. They want to get this right, not just for the families affected by this tragedy, but for the safety of everyone who flies.
Yeah. So we'll be keeping a close eye on the investigation.
Of course.
And share any updates. But for now, I think we've laid a good foundation here for understanding this tragic event.
We have. We've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah. We've explored, the unique challenges of flying in Alaska, got a sense of who the victims were.
Right.
And kind of the investigative process, what the NTSB is actually doing.
Yeah. And this is just the beginning. When we come back in part 2, we'll delve even deeper into the possible causes.
Okay.
And what this tragedy might mean for the future of aviation in Alaska.
Stay tuned. All right. So we're back now for part 2 of our deep dive into this Bering Air Flight 445 crash. And as we were talking before the break about the investigation, it just got me thinking about all the different factors the NTSB has to consider.
Yeah.
We've got these challenging weather conditions. We've got the question of why the pilot thought the runway was closed.
Right.
And then no distress signal. It's almost like a detective story,
It is. It's like, piecing together clues from all these different sources to try to understand what happened. And you're right, there are a lot of threads here to untangle.
So let's start with the weather.
Yeah.
Reports mention, snow fog, low temperatures.
Right.
How much of a role could those conditions have played in the crash?
Well, weather is always a factor in aviation, especially in Alaska.
Right.
But it's rarely the sole cause.
Okay.
In this case, we know the runway in Nome was open and had been de-iced, even though the pilot thought it was closed.
Right.
So while weather, may have been a contributing factor, it doesn't seem to be the main explanation.
Okay, so that's what makes this so tricky. If it wasn't just bad weather and the runway was actually open,
Right.
what else could have caused that sudden descent?
Well, the NTSB, they're going to be looking at a wide range of possibilities.
Okay.
Could there have been a mechanical issue with the plane itself?
Well,
Was there a sudden shift in weight or cargo that could have destabilized the aircraft?
right.
Even something like a bird strike, while rare, can't be ruled out at this stage.
Oh, I hadn't even considered a bird strike.
Yeah.
So they're really examining every possible angle here.
They are. It's very thorough.
What about the pilot's experience? I know you mentioned he was from Nome, so he was familiar with this route.
Yes, the pilot, Chad Antill, was a local
Okay.
and, experienced flying in Alaskan conditions.
Okay.
So that's why the fact that he thought the runway was closed when it was open is particularly puzzling.
Yeah, that's what I keep coming back to. Was there some kind of miscommunication with air traffic control? Or could there have been something else distracting him in the cockpit?
Those are definitely questions the NTSB will be investigating.
Okay.
They're going to be scrutinizing those air traffic control recordings,
Right.
listening for any indication of confusion or missed communication.
Okay.
They'll also be looking at, the pilot's training records,
Right.
medical history, even things like fatigue levels.
Oh, wow.
It's very thorough.
It's like they're building a profile of everything that was happening
Exactly.
in those final moments,
It's about understanding the pilot's actions, his decision-making process.
Right.
And whether there were any external pressures or factors that may have influenced his judgment.
Right, and then we can't forget about that lack of a distress signal. Does that point towards, like, a catastrophic event that happened so quickly there was just no time to react?
It's possible, if there was a sudden major mechanical failure or a rapid loss of control, the crew might not have had time to send out a distress call.
Yeah.
The NTSB will be looking very closely at the wreckage, particularly the condition of the emergency transmitter itself.
Right.
To see if, it was damaged on impact or if there was some kind of malfunction.
So, this whole investigation feels like a giant puzzle, and the black box recordings are probably some of the most crucial pieces.
Oh, absolutely.
What kind of information can they actually get from those?
Well, the black boxes are incredibly valuable tools for investigators.
Okay.
They record those cockpit conversations.
Right.
So they can actually hear, the interaction between the pilots, any concerns they were voicing,
Wow.
any decisions they were making.
That's incredible.
They also capture data on the plane's altitude speed heading engine performance.
Wow.
Basically, a second-by-second snapshot of the aircraft's technical performance.
So it's almost like having a fly-on-the-wall perspective
Right?
of those final moments.
Yeah,
But I know analyzing all that data takes time.
it does.
Are there any specific technologies or techniques that the NTSB uses to make sense of it all?
Oh, absolutely. They have specialized software and labs where they can reconstruct the flight path, analyze the sounds in the cockpit to listen for any warning alarms or unusual noises.
Okay.
They can even use simulations to test different scenarios.
It's high-tech detective work.
It is very much so.
It's amazing how far those techniques have come.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this crash is sparking a lot of conversations about aviation safety, especially in Alaska.
It is, yeah.
Are there any specific regulations or measures already in place to kind of address the unique challenges of flying in this environment?
Yes, there are, pilots operating in Alaska need specialized training and certifications to handle the unique weather and terrain.
Right.
There are stricter maintenance requirements for aircraft flying in these demanding conditions.
Okay.
And there's a constant push to improve weather forecasting communication systems
Right.
in these remote areas.
So there's already an awareness of the higher risks involved.
Absolutely.
But do you think this tragedy might lead to even more changes or stricter regulations?
It's likely, every aviation accident is a learning opportunity, a chance to evaluate existing protocols and see if they're sufficient.
Yeah.
This crash might prompt a review of, pilot training procedures,
Right.
communication protocols between aircraft and air traffic control,
Right.
even, aircraft design and technology to enhance safety in these challenging conditions.
It makes me think about those two healthcare workers that we talked about earlier, Rhone and Kameron.
Right.
Their dedication to serving their community, even in the face of these risks, it's pretty inspiring.
It is. It's a reminder that for many Alaskans, flying isn't a choice.
Right.
It's a necessity.
It highlights that balance between risk and necessity
Absolutely.
that Alaskans kind of live with every day.
They rely on air travel, but they're also keenly aware of the inherent dangers.
So it brings up a really important question. How do we make sure that flying remains as safe as possible?
Right.
While still, meeting the needs of these remote communities? It's complex.
It is. It's a very complex issue.
Yeah.
But I think technology will play a big role. We're seeing advancements in aircraft design, navigation systems, weather forecasting.
Yeah.
Imagine a future where planes can better withstand turbulence or icing conditions.
Right.
Or where real-time weather data helps pilots make, safer decisions in flight.
Yeah, that sounds incredible.
It's coming.
Yeah, and it seems like better communication is key too.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially in areas where the weather can change so quickly.
It can change on a dime.
Making sure the pilots have the most up-to-date information.
Yes, making sure that pilots and air traffic control are always on the same page, especially in those critical moments.
Right.
And this tragedy might spur development of, even more sophisticated communication systems specifically tailored for Alaska's remote regions.
Wow. So while this is a devastating event, it could also be a catalyst for some really positive change.
Absolutely.
Pushing for even greater safety measures.
Yeah.
Technological advancements.
And that's where I find hope.
Yeah.
Not in easy answers, but in the commitment to learning from these tragedies and striving to prevent them in the future.
It's a powerful thought.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground here, from the intricacies of this investigation to the potential for, these positive changes.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears a bit in part 3.
Okay.
And talk about the broader impact of this crash, especially on those Alaskan communities that rely so heavily on air travel.
Yeah, it's a crucial aspect of this story that we can't overlook. The human impact of this tragedy runs deep.
So we've spent a lot of time talking about, the technical side of this crash,
Right.
the investigation, all of that. But I think it's important to circle back to the human element.
Yeah.
This wasn't just an incident.
Yeah.
It was a tragedy that really affected real people, families,
Absolutely.
entire communities.
And I think it's particularly poignant in Alaska, where aviation is so woven into daily life.
Right.
I mean, for many Alaskans, this crash wasn't just a news story. It was a stark reminder of the risks
Yeah.
that they face every time they board a plane.
Like, it makes you realize that, flying for them isn't a luxury. It's an essential part of life.
It is. It's something they rely on for connection healthcare work, everything.
We talked about the communities of Nome and Unalakleet, where the flight, originated and was headed.
Yeah.
What has the reaction been like there?
It's been a mix of grief shock and a coming together of the community.
Okay.
Vigils have been held. Donations have poured in for the victims' families, and there's a palpable sense of shared loss.
Yeah.
A pastor in Nome, Amanda Snyder, was quoted as saying, "It's just heartbreaking because every single person in this room has been on one of those planes."
Wow. That's powerful.
Yeah.
It speaks to that collective experience of flying in Alaska.
It does.
That shared understanding of the risks, the reliance on this mode of transportation.
And it's a reminder that, these incidents don't just impact individuals, they ripple through entire communities.
Right. And for a place like Nome, where, like we said, it's so small, everyone knows everyone.
Right.
That loss must be felt even more acutely.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But, amidst all of that grief, we also see that incredible resilience. People coming together.
Always.
To support one another.
Yeah, sharing stories, finding strength in their shared experience.
It's a testament to the human spirit.
It is.
The ability to find hope and connection.
Yeah.
Even in the face of tragedy.
And the resilience of the Alaskan spirit.
Yeah.
A certain determination to persevere despite the challenges.
Alaskans have a long history of facing adversity.
They do.
Extreme weather, isolation.
Yeah.
The inherent risks of living in such a rugged environment.
They adapt, they find solutions, they carry on.
It's a valuable lesson, I think, for all of us.
Yeah.
Regardless of where we live.
Absolutely.
It's about finding that balance between acknowledging the risks.
Yeah.
And, finding the courage to keep moving forward.
It's about not letting fear paralyze us,
right,
but instead using it as a catalyst for growth, innovation, and positive change.
And speaking of change, I can't help but wonder how this crash will shape the future of aviation in Alaska. We've talked about the potential improvements to technology regulations, training, but I'm curious about the bigger picture.
Yeah, I think this tragedy will undoubtedly spark a broader conversation about the balance between, the necessity of air travel and the safety of those who rely on it.
Yeah.
We'll likely see a renewed focus on developing even more robust safety measures.
Okay.
Exploring new technologies to mitigate risks, and perhaps even reevaluating flight routes and infrastructure to prioritize safety.
It's a conversation that needs to involve everyone.
It does. Pilots, airlines, regulators, the communities themselves.
Yeah, it requires a real collaborative effort to find solutions that work.
Absolutely.
For everyone.
And I believe that this tragedy, as heartbreaking as it is, can be a catalyst for positive change.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with a sense of hope, a belief that we can learn from this and work together to make aviation safer for everyone, especially in a place like Alaska, where it's so vital.
I share that hope, and I believe that the memory of those lost in this crash will serve as a powerful reminder of the importance of that mission.
Well, this has been a heavy but really important conversation. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Bering Air Flight 445 crash, and we encourage you to continue exploring this topic, learn more about the ongoing investigation, and engage in these thoughtful discussions about how we can collectively work towards a safer future for aviation.